morning and welcome to the latest installment of Normal, Finding the Extra in the Ordinary. I'm your host and creator of this project, Rachel Macon. For those of you who aren't familiar with the project, let me fill you in. Most of you know that I'm a master's degree student in the School of Communication at ISU, and I'm working on this project entitled Normal, Finding the Extra in the Ordinary, where I conduct interviews with the great people of Normal to hear their stories. It's really similar to the Humans of New York concept. However, I am out to prove that you don't have to be in New York to meet interesting people and hear a good story. Also, while I'm doing this, I'm allowing our listeners to create a sense of community and realize just how diverse their little town really is. Once again, thank you to all of our listeners this far who have been a part of the project. I've met some amazing people on this journey. For today's latest installment, we have Ryan Blessey, a normal transplant from Jacksonville, Illinois, here with us to tell his story. Welcome to the show, and thanks for being here, Ryan.
Thank you, Rachel.
So, Ryan, how long have you been in Normal, and what brought you here?
I've just been in Normal for, I guess, a little over a year now, but what brought me here was, it was an interesting story, and maybe we can get into it later, but I just came essentially for grad school. I can't say that I ever imagined myself being in Normal at this time in my life, but I'm a graduate student in the School of Communication, and that's just kind of what got me here. So
that's great. Hey, that's good enough for us. You're here, you're on the show, so that's wonderful. Whenever you first arrived here, would you describe the community as welcoming? And I ask this question because I've interviewed tons of ISU and IWU students who say they're stuck in these college bubbles, so they feel almost separated from the community as a whole, but in their college bubble. Did you feel the same way?
I would definitely say, I would echo those in saying that I don't feel like a citizen of Normal. I feel like a citizen of the School of Communication, but maybe that's because I never leave there. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's anything maybe that I haven't really thought about it in terms of what the community has or has not done. But I can't say that I feel like I'm a citizen of Normal. I feel like I am an ISU student that just happens to be in the Normal area.
Yeah, and I've gotten that a lot from many students. And what do you think that the community can do to maybe bridge that gap and make those students feel more welcomed as part of the Normal community?
Well, coming from Jacksonville, we have three colleges arguably in that very small town, and just coming from that and having gone to high school in Jacksonville, kind of grew up there because of my family being around there. And kind of having that towny perspective, there's often a little bit of animosity between the college students and the townspeople, because the townspeople just kind of look at them as kind of, disrupting the flow of what a normal town should be. Mm-hmm. It's a little different to have colleges in your town, and especially when the colleges are kind of the big chunk of the population of the town whenever it's actually in session. So in terms of what the town could do, I think maybe just incorporating and recognizing the students as fellow citizens,
right.
And maybe not isolating them just to the uptown area or to the campus. I think that that's one way, and I think that they try to do that. There's festivals, there's events held in uptown. But again, I think a lot of those events you see more ISU students, more Wesleyan students, people like that at those festivals, and you don't get a really good feel for it being citizen oriented.
Yeah.
So there's again kind of that disparity between the two, and even if they are there, you don't see a ton of interaction between ISU folks and just the town of Normal.
That's very true. I mean, I can notice even going to the jazz festival, it was full of ISU students and IWU students, and not so many Bloomington Normal, maybe townies, I guess we could call them for the purposes of this interview. We'll call them townies. Well, I do have to ask, you've been here for about a year now. What's your favorite part of the community? Like, what do you love the most about being here at Normal?
Well, when I'm not on ISU's campus, doing grad school things, I think that one of the more fun things to do is just to go with some friends, and I already mentioned Uptown, but Uptown is probably one of the best places that this has to offer. It's Maggie Miley's is arguably my favorite place to be. Are
you a beer drinker, Ryan?
Yeah, but, so I think just having that place, and it's within walking distance of campus, and I think that having a place where students can go that feels a little bit more like a town feel than maybe a campus feel. Again, it's kind of associated with the campus, but I think having that is really helpful. It's still, I obviously don't feel like I'm incorporated into the community all that much, but I think that's a nice feature. And I think the fact that, in Normal, you're next to Bloomington, which has a little bit more of a city feel. Obviously, it's not a big metropolitan area, but you're not too far from maybe a busier place. But Normal itself is fairly quiet, and that's really nice. Feel safe here, and there's things to do though because of it having so many college students around and kind of catering to them to an extent.
That's great. Well, I think I've normaled you out for today. So how about we flip the script up and talk about just you and your life as a person. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Tell me about your happiest moment this far.
Well, I feel like there's been a lot of happy moments, obviously, along the way. So I'll just go with my most recent one, just because it's the first thing that popped in my head. But I would say my happiest moment is probably when my feet touched the ground in Rome, Italy over the summer. My ancestors came from Italy. I was just like, I'm home. And it was a really great trip. It was my first time out of the country, and I've always wanted to go one out of the country and two to Italy, so I was really happy. It was my first trip, and I went with my now fiance, and we got engaged there in Florence, not in Rome, but we got engaged in Florence, and yeah, I would say that was probably a pretty great moment. So that's the one that just came to my mind, but obviously there's happy moments all throughout. So
next question for you, Ryan. Are you doing right now, you're 25, at 25, what you thought you would be doing?
Not at all. If you had asked me even, say I've been in this program for a year, so 2 years ago, so starting off my senior year at Illinois College, if you had asked me, are you going to go to grad school? My answer would have been no. Absolutely not. And I was asked several times by my advisor there, and I kind of stood my ground in saying, no, I'm just going to go get a real job and all that, and he convinced me to apply. It was free. I didn't have to do the GRE, and it was just, why not?
Right.
I didn't have any other prospects really, and I got in with a full assistantship, and that's kind of what brought me here. And I mean, no regrets. I'm a different person, I would say, as a result of it. But did I ever picture myself at 25 being in school still? No, not at all. I just assumed I would be working somewhere.
I can't let us in without asking you a couple sadder questions, okay? I have to ask you just a couple of those. So can you think of your saddest moment?
I actually think my saddest moment is going to sound really dramatic probably now, but it was still a really disappointing moment in that I was disappointed in myself. But when I was in 7th grade,
We're going way back.
Yeah. So 13 years old. So it was kind of a weird time. It was in 2001. So I grew up in Connecticut. So we were maybe an hour away from New York City. So 9/11 happened, and that had a really big impact. A lot of my friends had parents in the towers or relatives in the towers, and because they would just commute every day to work. And so that was like a weird moment. There was like a lot of sadness surrounding everything. 13, hormones are really weird. My sister left the house because she was going off to college that year. My dad wasn't around much. I mean, he hasn't really been around all that much in my life, but it was a particular absence at that point too. And I think that I felt very lost. We moved to a new house as well.
Right.
And essentially, I think I felt a very serious lack of control. And I was going through some bullying things too in middle school. I think I was just starting to kind of recognize, I was a little bit different from everybody else in terms of what I was attracted to, and that comes with the hormonal stuff. And I think that all had a very big impact on the fact that I began a bit of a truant streak. So I was skipping school several times without, telling my parents or anything like that. And I'd always been a good student prior to middle school, and all of these changes happening, but just kind of getting, D's and F's in some cases, and I just wasn't doing work also. And so I was skipping, and eventually the truancy officer was calling, and I was deleting the messages because I was home when they were calling and leaving the messages. And eventually got to a point where the truancy officer came to the house, and it was a scary moment for my mom, and I know that she was disappointed, and my family was disappointed in general. And after that, I kind of got my act together, and it was definitely a learning experience. I could have done it much differently, but it also could have been far worse. But I would say that was one of the saddest moments. It was just a sad year in general. My grandmother also had a very severe stroke due to an altitude thing. I don't know, it has a really long name to it, but that essentially made her fairly vegetative for the next 10 years or so. So there was just a lot that went down that year, and I obviously handled it in a way that seemed like it made sense at the time. But I would say I would never want to relive my 13th year again.
And you brought up a lot of points there that I have a lot of questions about. And I mean, from 9/11 to your father to your sexuality, you kind of touch on everything, and it all happened in this one year. So I can understand how difficult that could probably be. I mean, for a 13-year-old boy, that's probably hard to go through all of that. So let's start with 9/11. So at the time you were on the East Coast with your friends, and this tragic event happened. How did you guys make sense of what was actually occurring at that time, if you did have friends who had parents or relatives that were being, affected? I mean, your life changes in a matter of hours, and you're changed for the rest of your life. So how did you make sense of that at 13?
I remember being very glued to the TV and watching the news, and we had a couple of days off from school just because of all the things happening. And as it was found out more and more that a lot of people's families were affected, it just became almost like it was just an understanding that, this is a really serious thing. And like I said, I removed myself quite a bit from school just because of the whole truancy thing. So I know that I didn't experience a whole lot of it. I wasn't around as much my friends just because, you see your friends at school and I wasn't there.
Right.
So, but there were some significant changes to family life for people. And I think that, I made sense of it by watching TV, hearing how my friends were doing, whether it was a parent versus grandparent versus an aunt versus a cousin, something like that.
Right.
But I'm not sure how we made sense of it. It was something that you couldn't really make sense of, and I think even to this day, you can't really make sense of something on that scale. I think you learn to cope with it and just learn to live with the consequences of it.
Ryan, thank you so much. I have so many more questions to ask you, but unfortunately we are out of time for today. I cannot say thank you enough for taking your time out today and coming to talk with me about normal and your life.
Well, thank you for having me.
Come back anytime and see us, definitely. Well, that's all that we have for today. Stay tuned next week for our next installment of Normal, Finding the Extra in the Ordinary.